My sister Amelia, the surgeon, swirled her wine. Honestly, Leo, stick to your woodshop. The market is far too complex for you. My brother Mark, the corporate lawyer, smirked in agreement. She's right. You're a fantastic carpenter, but finances? That's our world, little brother. For 20 years, this was my role, the simple craftsman with sawdust on his jeans. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just slid a single piece of paper across the polished table of the Chicago steakhouse. My quarterly brokerage statement. I tapped the final number. This hobby, I said quietly, made more in the last 12 months than both your salaries, combined. The condescending smiles vanished. Silence fell, thick and heavy as unsanded oak. Amelia's face, usually a mask of surgical precision, was a mess of confusion. Mark just stared, his jaw tight. This wasn't how the family script was supposed to go. They were the Ivy League success stories, Dr. Vance and Mark Vance, Esquire. I was just Leo, the guy who took over Dad's Chicago woodshop when he passed. They saw Vance and Son as a legacy of calluses, not capital. For them, my path was a consolation prize. A respectable, if simple, life. They'd pay for these dinners out of a sense of pity, a family charity case and a flannel shirt. They never asked about my business's finances, assuming sawdust and debt were my only real companions. They never asked about anything that didn't fit their narrative of me. Mark finally found his voice, a low, accusatory hiss. "How?" he demanded, jabbing a finger at the statement. "This is impossible. You got a lucky tip, a fluke." He couldn't accept it. To him, my success wasn't earned. It was an accident that violated the natural order of our family, an order where I was always at the bottom. "A fluke," I repeated, my voice dangerously calm. I leaned forward, the leather of the booth creaking. "No, Mark, luck is for lotteries. This was work." My mind flashed back 10 years, to the suffocating quiet of the woodshop after Dad's funeral. You two delivered your polished eulogies and flew back to your real lives within a week. I was the one left with the keys, the scent of pine and grief, and a shoebox full of unpaid invoices. Vance and Son was bleeding out. Dad was a master craftsman, but a terrible businessman. The bank sent letters that felt more like threats. The thought of a foreclosure sign on the door, of losing the last physical piece of him, was a cold dread that kept me awake at night. So I started learning the one trade Dad never taught me: money. I didn't have an MBA from Wharton, Mark. I had a library card and a $20 a month internet plan. While you were networking at galas, and Amelia was at medical conferences in Hawaii, my nights were spent in the dusty shop office. The only light was a cheap desk lamp, illuminating stacks of 10K reports I had printed out. My companions weren't colleagues. They were Benjamin Graham and Peter Lynch. My highlighters ran dry, marking up passages on price-to-earnings ratios and free cash flow. I never treated it like a game. You two see the market as a high-stakes casino, a place for bold bets and insider tips. That's your world of abstract numbers and quick wins. My world is tangible. It's built on patience and integrity. I applied the exact same principles I use for a custom dining table to every potential investment. I'd examine a company's balance sheet the way I inspect a slab of walnut, looking for a solid, straight grain, a strong financial foundation. I'd scrutinize their business model for a durable competitive advantage, the equivalent of mortise and tenon joinery that holds up under pressure. I read years of management's shareholder letters, listening for honesty and humility, the same way I listen to a client to understand what they truly want. I wasn't looking for flashy veneers or trendy designs. I was looking for companies built to last for generations. My first real investment was a $2,000 profit from a set of cherrywood bookcases. I didn't buy some hot tech stock you'd brag about. I bought a small piece of a boring, dividend-paying tool manufacturer whose products I used every single day. The next year, profits from a kitchen remodel went into a railway company. Slow. Meticulous. Each share was a plank, carefully chosen and measured twice before I made the cut. Over a decade I built it. I looked back at their shattered composure. Amelia's hand trembled slightly as she set her wineglass down. You saw me in a flannel shirt covered in sawdust and assumed that's all there was, I said, my voice cutting through the silence. You thought I was just sanding wood. You were wrong. I was building an empire. You just never bothered to ask for the blueprints. The silence that followed that dinner lasted 3 days. It was a cold, simmering quiet, the kind that comes before a storm. Then, the coordinated attack began. It started, not with an apology, but with a phone call from Mark. His voice was clipped, all business, stripped of the steakhouse shock. Leo, I've had my paralegal look into some structures for you, he said, no preamble. Given the size of your portfolio, you're dangerously exposed. We need to set up a trust, maybe a family LLC, to shield the assets. It's the smart play. He wasn't offering advice. He was asserting control. He used words like fiduciary and tax liability, like weapons, designed to make me feel small again, to remind me that this was his world, not mine. I was just visiting. He didn't ask what my plans were. He told me what they should be. An hour later, Amelia called. Her tone was the opposite. All honeyed concern, the surgeon's practiced bedside manner. Leo, honey, I know Mark can be a bit direct. But he's just worried. We both are. This is a wonderful thing, but it's a huge responsibility. It changes things for the family. She emphasized the word, as if it were a sacred pact I was in danger of violating. We think it's best if we manage this together. To protect what Dad built. To protect our future. Protect. They kept using that word, but I knew what it really meant. It meant control. It meant putting my success back in a box they could manage, re-establishing the old order. The final act of their play came that Friday. They didn't call. They just showed up at the wood shop, Mark in a tailored suit that cost more than my table saw, Amelia in heels that sank slightly into the sawdust-covered floor. They looked like they'd taken a wrong turn on their way to a fundraiser, their faces a mixture of discomfort and determination. I was in the middle of shaping a piece of maple, the smell of the wood thick in the air. I didn't stop. I let the shriek of the router fill the space between us for a long moment before cutting the power. The sudden silence was deafening. Mark cleared his throat and placed a leather-bound folder on my workbench, pushing aside a set of calipers. We had this drawn up, he said, his voice echoing slightly in the large space. It's a proposal. I opened it. The title on the first page was printed in an elegant serif font, The Vance Family Capital Group. It's simple, Mark explained, pointing a manicured finger at the document. We pool the assets into a single fund. I'll act as the managing partner. My firm will handle the legal and financial oversight for a nominal fee. Amelia will be a co-trustee. And me? I asked, my eyes still on the page. Amelia stepped forward, placing a hand on my arm. It felt proprietary. You'll be the primary beneficiary, Leo. You can focus on your beautiful woodwork, and we'll handle the stress. We'll make sure the money grows, that it's safe. It's the perfect partnership. Beneficiary, a passive word. The person who receives, who is provided for. The child. The charity case. It was all there. The condescension, the dismissal, the sheer, breathtaking arrogance. Now just wrapped in legalese and fake concern. They hadn't heard a word I said at that restaurant. They hadn't seen the decade of work. They saw a lottery ticket, and they had come to cash it in for me. This wasn't a partnership. It was a coup. I closed the folder and pushed it back across the workbench. the leather sliding smoothly over the scarred wood. "No," Mark's jaw tightened. "No. Leo, this is a professional, legally sound strategy. You don't understand I understand perfectly." I cut him off, my voice as hard and flat as the steel of my chisels. "You see a pile of money you think I stumbled into. I see a 10-year business plan executed with discipline. You see a winning lottery ticket. And you want to be my financial advisors." I let out a short, humorless laugh. I picked up the leather folder again, but this time I flipped it open with a flick of my wrist, not bothering to read it again. "Let's talk about your professional strategy," I said, my voice calm and even. "Mark, you propose your firm manages the assets for a nominal fee. I read the fine print. 1.5% annually. My current weighted expense ratio, across my entire portfolio, is less than 0.1%. Your help would cost me over $200,000 in the first year alone. That's not fiduciary duty. It's a shakedown, wrapped in a Brooks Brothers suit." Mark's face went from pale to chalky. He looked like one of his own clients who'd just been cross-examined into a corner. I turned to Amelia. "And you, a co-trustee? What financial expertise are you bringing? You're a brilliant surgeon, but if I had a complex tax issue, I wouldn't ask you to scrub in. This isn't about protecting me. This is about controlling a narrative that's spun out of your grasp. The idea that the woodworker in the family built something you couldn't. It's just too much for your egos to bear." I tossed the proposal onto a stack of scrap lumber. It landed with a soft, pathetic thud. "You think because I have sawdust on my boots that my plan is written on a napkin? You think I built this much wealth by accident, without professional counsel?" I walked over to my scarred office desk in the corner and picked up a business card from a small holder I'd carved from a block of walnut. I slid it across the workbench. It stopped right in front of Mark's perfectly polished shoes. "That's Sarah Chen," I said, "head of estate planning at Morrison & Forster. She and I set up my irrevocable trust 3 years ago. It's designed to be lean, tax-efficient, and managed by objective third parties. Your little Vance Family Capital Group isn't just amateur hour. It's insulting." The air in the shop crackled. The smell of wood shavings suddenly felt like the smell of my victory. Their meticulously constructed reality, the one where they were the brilliant saviors and I was the grateful simpleton, had just been dismantled, piece by piece, with the same precision I used to cut a dovetail joint. Amelia looked like she might be sick. Mark stared at the business card as if it were a venomous snake. "This meeting is over," I said, my voice dropping back to its normal, quiet tone. I turned my back on them, picked up the piece of maple I'd been working on, and flipped the switch on the router. The high-pitched scream of the blade filled the air again, a definitive, unarguable wall of sound. It was the sound of me getting back to work. It was the sound of... The silence that swallowed the scream of the router was profound. It wasn't an awkward silence or a tense one. It was the clean, quiet air that follows a storm when the pressure has finally broken. In that quiet, surrounded by the familiar scent of maple and machine oil, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders I hadn't realized I'd been carrying for 20 years. They hadn't just left my shop, they had been ejected from a part of my life they never had the clearance to enter. I looked around at the tools on the walls, the stacks of raw lumber, the half-finished commissions. They saw this place as a limitation, a charming, rustic cage that kept me from their world of ambition and intellect. They never understood. This wasn't my cage. It was my crucible. The discipline it took to hand-cut a perfect dovetail joint was the same discipline that kept me from panic selling during a market crash. The patience required to apply 10 coats of hand-rubbed finish to a tabletop was the same patience that allowed my investments to compound for a decade. My success didn't happen in spite of the woodshop. It happened because of it. The two were inextricably linked. And now, the fruits of one were about to build a fortress for the other. My next moves were not made in anger. Revenge, like fine carpentry, is a matter of precision, not passion. It's about careful planning and flawless execution, not a sloppy emotional outburst. The next morning, I didn't call them. I didn't send a gloating text. My first call was to a commercial real estate agent. The sprawling old warehouse that housed my shop, a dusty brick building where I'd been leasing a corner for 15 years, was quietly on the market. By the end of the week, I sent a cashier's check from my brokerage account to the title company. I wasn't a tenant anymore, I was the landlord. My second call was to a supplier in Germany. I ordered a 5-axis CNC machine, an industrial marvel of engineering that could carve a complex 3-dimensional form from a solid block of walnut, guided by a digital model. It was an investment that would merge my father's old-world craft with 21st-century technology, allowing Vance and Son to take on architectural and design projects I'd previously only dreamed of. My third and final call was to my estate lawyer, Sarah Chen. "The foundation," I said, my voice steady. "It's time." We didn't call it the Vance Family Capital Group. We called it the Vance and Son Legacy Fund. Its mission was simple: provide grants and no-interest loans to skilled tradespeople in the Chicago area trying to start their own businesses. We would fund welders, not wealth managers, plumbers, not paralegals, carpenters, not surgeons. I was taking our family name and anchoring it firmly to the world of calloused hands and honest labor they so desperately wanted to escape. I didn't have to tell them. The world told them for me. Mark found out first. He had a Google alert set for his own name, a digital monument to his ego that also happened to trigger on the family name. An article from a Chicago business journal popped into his inbox. The headline read, "Historic West Loop Warehouse sells for $4.8 million to Vance and Son Woodcraft for major expansion." The article detailed plans for a state-of-the-art design and fabrication firm, creating 20 new skilled jobs. He would have read it sitting in his corner office, the very place from which he'd condescendingly planned my financial rescue. He didn't call me. What could he possibly say? Amelia found out at a hospital fundraiser. A fellow board member, the wife of a prominent real estate developer, approached her between sips of champagne. "Amelia, darling, I saw the news about your family's business. How terribly exciting. Your brother is making quite a name for himself. And that legacy fund? What a beautiful, meaningful tribute to your father." Amelia, who had built her entire identity on being the prestigious Dr. Vance, was suddenly relegated to being the sister of the successful craftsman. She was no longer the sole arbiter of the family's public good. I imagined her smile, tight and practiced, as she accepted congratulations for something she had not only had no part in, but had actively tried to subvert. The true reckoning came 2 months later, at Thanksgiving. It was held at Amelia's house, a sterile, minimalist space that always felt more like an art gallery than a home. The air was different. The usual power dynamic: Mark holding court about a big case, Amelia detailing a complex surgery, me answering benign questions about wood grain, had vanished. There was a vacuum, and for the first time, they didn't know how to fill it. They were hesitant, careful. They were watching me. Dinner was a quiet, painfully polite affair. Finally, as dessert was served, Amelia cleared her throat, the sound unnaturally loud in the silent room. "Leo," she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it, "the foundation, it's a very generous thing to do." Mark just nodded, staring at his plate. The star litigator, with no closing argument. I took a slow sip of water, letting the silence stretch. I didn't need to relitigate our fight. The evidence of my victory wasn't a number on a piece of paper anymore. It was in the 20 new jobs I was creating. It was in the deed to a building that now bore our family name. It was in the future of artisans who would get their start because of a fund I built. I had done more than just make money. I had seized control of the family narrative. I had redefined what it meant to be a Vance. I looked at them, my brother and my sister, not with anger, but with a strange, quiet finality. They weren't my rivals anymore. They were just my siblings. Dad always said the most important tool in any workshop is a solid foundation, I said, raising my glass. He was right. They raised their glasses, their movements slow, almost reluctant. They understood. I wasn't just talking about concrete or a charity. I was talking about the new bedrock of our family, and it was a bedrock I had laid myself. They drank, and the silence that followed was not one of anger or tension. It was the quiet of acceptance, the sound of a new world order settling into place. The new order settled into a routine. Months passed. My CNC machine hummed day and night, carving intricate designs with a precision that was almost poetic. The Legacy Fund awarded its first 3 grants to a young female welder starting a mobile repair service, a master plumber developing a water-saving fixture, and a duo of electricians launching a smart home installation company. Vance & Son was no longer just me and 2 part-time helpers. It was a team of 15. The sawdust in the air felt different now, charged with purpose and prosperity. My communication with Mark and Amelia was sparse, limited to brief, stilted texts on birthdays and holidays. The Cold War had become a cold peace. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. It was Amelia. Her voice was thin, frayed at the edges like a dull saw blade. "Leo, can you meet us?" "Mark and I. It's important." There was no honeyed concern, no surgical confidence, just raw, undisguised panic. I told her I was busy, but they could come to the shop. She agreed immediately. They arrived an hour later, looking like ghosts. Mark's expensive suit hung on him, his face gaunt and gray. Amelia's hands trembled, not slightly this time, but uncontrollably. They stood in the gleaming new reception area I'd built, a space with polished concrete floors and a feature wall of book-matched walnut, looking utterly lost. They were dwarfed by the scale of my new operation. I led them back to my office, the same small, dusty room from before, though now it had a new window overlooking the bustling workshop floor. I didn't offer them coffee. I just sat behind my old desk and waited. Mark was the one who spoke, his voice a hoarse whisper. "I'm ruined, Leo." He explained it in broken pieces. The star lawyer, known for his aggressive, high-risk corporate structuring, had finally bet on the wrong horse. He'd orchestrated a massive private equity deal, pouring his own money and a significant amount of his firm's capital into it. He'd used leverage, derivatives, all the complex instruments he once implied I was too simple to understand, but his due diligence had been sloppy. The company he'd targeted was a house of cards. When it collapsed, it didn't just fall, it imploded, taking his career, his reputation, and his entire net worth with it. The firm had fired him. The SEC was investigating. He told me it was a sure thing. Amelia choked out, tears tracing paths through her expensive foundation. I co-signed on the loans. I invested everything he told me to. The hospital board asked for my resignation from the finance committee. They said there was a perception of poor judgment. They sat there, the brilliant surgeon and the master litigator, utterly broken. They had built their lives on a foundation of arrogance, believing their Ivy League intellect made them invincible. But their foundation was sand. They'd built a flashy facade with no structural integrity. And the first real storm had brought the whole thing crashing down. Mark finally looked at me, his eyes hollow. The condescension was gone, replaced by a desperate, humiliating plea. "We need your help," he said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "We need money, a lot of it, to pay the lawyers, to stop the bank from taking Amelia's house, just until we can get back on our feet." I listened, my face impassive. I felt no surge of triumph, no satisfying rush of vindication. I just felt the quiet, profound finality of it all. This was the end of their story. The real one, not the one they told at dinner parties. I leaned back in my chair, the old wood creaking a familiar protest. "You remember when you came here with that proposal?" I asked softly. The Vance Family Capital Group? They both flinched. You wanted to protect my assets. You wanted to provide professional oversight. You told me I didn't understand the world you lived in. I let the words hang in the air. It seems I understand it better than you ever did. You didn't invest. You gambled. You chased a hot tip, a quick win, and you got burned. There was no margin of safety. There was no solid joinery. It was all veneer. I stood up and walked to the new window overlooking the shop floor. I pointed to the young welder I'd funded, who was meticulously fitting a custom iron gate. Her loan from the legacy fund was $50,000, I said. Before she got a dime, she had to submit a 3-year business plan, a cash flow projection, and a personal financial statement. She had to prove she was building something real. I turned back to them. Their faces were a canvas of despair and dawning comprehension. They finally understood. I'm not giving you a handout, I said, my voice leaving no room for negotiation. But our name is on a fund, designed to help people who build things. If you want help, you will apply for it, just like everyone else. A flicker of disbelief crossed Mark's face. Apply. Leo, we're your family, not some charity case. That's exactly what you are, I said, my voice devoid of heat. You've come to me for a handout, because you mismanaged your own affairs. The only difference between you and anyone else who comes to this fund is that I know for a fact your business plan failed. I laid out my terms, the words falling like hammer blows in the quiet office. This isn't a bailout, it's a restructuring. Your lives are the distressed asset. I will hire an independent financial workout specialist. You will give them every receipt, every statement, every password. You will follow their plan without question. Amelia, you will sell your house. Mark, you'll sell the condo, the cars, the club memberships, the wine collection. All of it will be liquidated to pay your creditors. What's left of your pride is a luxury you can no longer afford. I leaned forward. The fund will not pay your legal fees, but it may offer you a structured, no-interest loan for basic living expenses, a small apartment, groceries, utilities. That's it, and that loan has covenants. They stared at me, their faces hollow. Mark, I continued, the fund's grant recipients often need pro bono legal help to set up their LLCs and review contracts. You will be their counsel. 10 hours a week. Unpaid. You'll be helping build the very businesses you once would have dismissed. I turned to Amelia. We partner with a community health clinic. They're understaffed. They need someone to manage patient intake and scheduling. You're organized. You'll volunteer there. You will trade your designer scrubs for a clipboard. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the work. Their penance would be to engage in the real, unglamorous labor of building and serving, the very things their arrogance had made them blind to. I reached into my desk drawer and pulled out 2 application forms, the same ones I gave the welder. I slid them across the scarred oak. This is the only help I am offering. You can accept my terms, or you can face bankruptcy alone. The choice is yours. Amelia's shoulder slumped in utter defeat. Mark, the great litigator, just stared at the papers, speechless. I had taken their world, with all its complex rules and unspoken hierarchies, and replaced it with my own. A world where your worth was measured not by your title, but by the work of your hands. And in my world, they were starting at the bottom. What would you do in my situation? Would you show your siblings the investment portfolio to finally prove them wrong, or would you just keep your success a secret?